She fed a mute boy in secret every day, until one day helicopters landed and revealed the unthinkable. A silent boy, a missing child, and a waitress who broke every rule to feed him. For weeks, he sat alone in the corner booth, never speaking a word, until one stormy morning, he vanished. What followed wasn't just a search, but the unraveling of a secret that would shock an entire town. Helicopters landed, a billionaire walked into a diner, and the woman who once served coffee became something no one expected, a mother by choice. This is the story of a sandwich, a scarred heart, and the love that rebuilt them both. Stay tuned. You won't believe how it ends. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. The bell above the door gave a soft, familiar chime as the wind swept in off the Pacific, carrying with it the scent of sea salt and fog. Emma Rowe was already behind the counter of the Driftwood Diner. Sleeves rolled, coffee pot warm in her hand, moving with the quiet rhythm of someone who knew every inch of the place. Morning light spilled through the salt-streaked windows, washing the worn tile floors in a dull glow. The regulars had begun to trickle in. Lobstermen in windbreakers, a retired teacher with her crossword, the couple from the antique shop 2 doors down. But Emma's eyes weren't on them. She kept glancing at the corner booth, the one that faced the ocean, tucked away just enough to feel safe. He was there, like always. The boy, no one really knew his name, but Emma had come to think of him as Noah. It was scrawled once, faintly, in crayon, on the bottom corner of a drawing he'd left behind. She never asked for more. He was maybe 8, maybe 9. Hard to tell under the oversized hoodie that swallowed him whole. He never spoke, never ordered, never moved much. Just came in, same time each morning, and sat with his knees pulled to his chest, eyes turned to the sea. The first time he showed up, customers complained. He doesn't buy anything. Why is he just staring out the window like that? Creepy, if you ask me. Emma said nothing. The next morning, before opening, she made an extra sandwich. Scrambled egg, a slice of ham, melted cheese on toasted sourdough. She poured a paper cup of warm milk and placed it gently on a tray with a napkin folded just right. When the boy came in, she walked the tray over to him without a word. He looked up with wide, shadowed eyes, said nothing, just nodded. Once. It was enough, and so it began. Every morning. Same food, same corner, same nod. Carl, the owner, wasn't thrilled. "You feeding that kid out of your own pocket?" he asked one morning, arms crossed, voice low but sharp. Emma didn't answer at first. She was wiping down the counter, her hands steady. "It's just a sandwich, Carl." "That sandwich could be sold," he snapped. "We don't run a shelter." "He's not a stray," Emma replied. "He's a child, a hungry one." Carl scoffed. "He's mute. He won't talk. He just draws. He's not our problem." Emma looked at him then, steady and clear. "If no one else cares, I will." The conversation ended there. Carl huffed and stomped back into the kitchen, muttering about payroll and charity cases. But he didn't stop her. Not really. Maybe deep down, he knew there were some things that didn't balance out on a spreadsheet. Noah kept coming, sometimes drenched from the rain, sometimes shaking from the morning wind, but always with those dark eyes and that silent gratitude. After the first week, he started leaving drawings on the table when he left. Emma found them neatly folded beside the empty plate. Crayon sketches of houses, hearts, trees, the ocean. One showed a woman behind a counter, smiling, her hair in a ponytail. That one she kept tucked into her apron pocket like a secret prayer. He never said a word, but he was speaking louder than most people ever did. Emma didn't ask where he came from. She didn't ask why he never spoke or who might be looking for him. She had grown up in the foster system, shuffled from one stranger's house to another. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to eat in corners, to hope someone would notice, and fear what might happen if they did. When she was 12, there had been a woman, Maggie, who ran a community kitchen in San Francisco. Emma had wandered in one rainy afternoon with a broken shoe and a stomach like a knot. Maggie hadn't asked her name. She'd just handed her a bowl of stew, sat beside her, and said, "You can stay as long as you need." That moment had stayed in Emma's bones. Now, maybe she could pass it on. She didn't know what had happened to this boy, why he clung to silence so fiercely, or why no one else seemed to notice him. But she did. And each morning, she made him breakfast with a care that went beyond hunger. She folded the napkin neatly, drew little smiley faces in the corner, kept the milk just warm enough. And every morning, when he looked up at her with those weary eyes and gave that small nod, she felt something shift. A quiet acknowledgement. A pact. "I see you. You're safe here." It wasn't much, but it was everything. The fog began to lift over Monterey Bay that morning, sun breaking through the gray like a promise. The diner buzzed with movement, orders flying, plates clattering, but Emma's world stayed centered around that small figure in the corner booth, drawing again, lost in lines and colors. She didn't know that everything was about to change, that in just a few days, the world outside their small diner would crash in with the force of rotor blades and the weight of a story long buried. She didn't know that the boy, with no voice, had a name that echoed across private islands and tech headlines, or that her quiet defiance would soon draw the eyes of someone who had searched oceans for a son thought lost. All she knew was this, that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a sandwich placed gently on a table. Sometimes it's staying when no one else will. And sometimes it's choosing to see someone who the world walks past. This is only the beginning of Emma and Noah's story. If this opening stirred something in you, don't miss the journey ahead. Subscribe to our channel and follow the next chapters, because the next part is even more powerful than you can imagine. The rain came hard that morning, sweeping in from the ocean in sheets, blurring the windows of the driftwood diner until the world outside looked like a watercolor in motion. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the warm interior. The clinking of plates and hum of soft conversation, a familiar rhythm to most. But not to Emma. She stood behind the counter, holding a sandwich she'd already prepared. A routine now, even before unlocking the front door. Egg, ham, cheese, toasted sourdough. A paper cup of warm milk beside it. Both sat on the tray in front of her, untouched. The corner booth was empty. Noah wasn't there. Emma stared at the spot as if willing his small figure to appear, hood up, crayon clutched tight in one hand. But the window remained fogged over, empty of the image she had come to depend on like sunrise. "Grace?" Carl's voice echoed from the kitchen, louder than it needed to be. "You okay? Orders are backing up." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her hand slowly set the tray down on the counter. Something in her chest was tightening. Something she couldn't explain. Worry wasn't unfamiliar to her. It had been a companion since childhood. But this was different. This was dread. Noah had never missed a morning. Not once in over a month. Not rain. Not wind. Not even the town's rolling blackouts had kept him away. Emma tore off her apron, dropped it on the counter, and grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. "I'll be back," she muttered. Carl poked his head out just in time to see the door swing shut behind her. Outside, the storm hit her like a slap. Her coat was soaked through in minutes, hair plastered to her cheeks, boots splashing through flooded curbs. She didn't care. She ran, past the bakery, the bookstore, the faded movie theater that hadn't shown a film in 2 years. Every alley, every bus stop, every stairwell. Her breath came in sharp, panicked gasps, but she didn't slow. "Noah," she called, even though she knew he wouldn't answer. Even though part of her new calling was pointless, she checked behind the farmers' market stalls, now shuttered and clattering in the wind. The alley behind the diner where he'd once drawn a rainbow on a soggy napkin. Nothing. The world was gray and cold and blurring. "Please," she thought, "please be okay." Her heart thudded like thunder in her chest as she rounded the back of a laundromat and froze. There, wedged between two dumpsters, barely visible in the storm's gloom, was a small, huddled figure. Emma's legs buckled with relief. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Noah," she breathed. He didn't look up. His arms were wrapped tight around his knees, his hoodie soaked and clinging to his thin frame. In one hand, almost disintegrating from the rain, was a drawing. The crayon colors bled, the paper warped and soft, but Emma could still make it out. A stick figure woman in a ponytail, holding a heart between two hands. She gently reached for him. He flinched, then slowly turned toward her. His lips trembled. His eyes, those deep, silent eyes, were filled with something more than fear. "Shame! Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling him into her arms. He didn't resist. He was cold, skin like ice beneath the wet hoodie, but he clung to her with small hands as if the world would disappear if he let go. "You don't have to hide," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're not alone. You're not invisible." She wrapped her coat around him, gathered him into her arms, and carried him through the storm, step by heavy step, back toward her apartment above the florist shop on the edge of town. She didn't stop to think, didn't question if she was doing the right thing. She just moved. Because someone had to. When they reached the apartment, she unlocked the door with shaking hands and carried him straight to the bathroom. The space was small and worn, the tiles chipped, and the mirror slightly foggy even when dry. But it was warm, and it was safe. Emma ran the tub, testing the temperature. Noah stood silently, water pooling around his shoes. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just watched her. With gentle fingers, she helped him out of the soaked hoodie, the stiff jeans that clung to his legs. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away, only stood still as she guided him into the tub. The water swirled around his small frame, steam rising like breath. She sat beside him, rolled up her sleeves, and washed the dirt from his skin, his arms, his neck, his hair. She poured warm water over his head in slow, steady streams. His eyes never left hers. Afterward, she wrapped him in a fluffy towel and dressed him in one of her old t-shirts. It hung past his knees. She made him sit on the couch and placed a tray of warm soup and toast in front of him. He ate in small, reverent bites, as if afraid it would be taken away. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions. She just stayed close. When he finished, he curled into the couch, and she pulled a blanket over him. The light outside had turned amber gray, the street lamps flickering to life. She sat in the armchair across from him, watching as his breathing slowed. His body softened. Then she spoke. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. Noah opened his eyes. "I had a little brother, Jonah. He was 5 when he died." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I was supposed to be watching him. I got distracted, just for a moment. He followed a dog into the road. I never saw it coming." She swallowed the ache. He was quiet, too. Drew little rockets and dinosaurs, always humming to himself. She looked over at Noah, her eyes brimming but steady. "Maybe some part of him is why I noticed you. Maybe that's why I couldn't walk away." Noah's gaze lingered on her face. Then he reached for the small notebook he always carried. The pages were damp, but mostly intact. He opened to a fresh one and began to draw. She watched in silence. 2 stick figures, one with long hair, one in an oversized t-shirt, a small house, a heart above it. He turned the notebook toward her. Emma pressed her fingers to her lips, then reached out to touch the page. Her hand trembled. "That's us," she whispered. Noah nodded, and when he leaned his head against her arm, his eyes fluttering shut, his fingers still reaching for hers, Emma knew. She hadn't just fed a hungry boy. She had become something else entirely, the person he trusted, the hand he reached for in the dark. And whether she was ready for it or not, she wasn't going to let go. The fog rolled in heavy and low the next morning, blanketing Monterey Bay in a hush that seemed to still the town. The usual clinking and clattering of breakfast hour at the Driftwood Diner were subdued, even the regulars speaking in softer tones. Emma stood behind the counter, wiping down the surface more times than necessary, her eyes flickering now and then to the booth near the window where Noah sat, bundled in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big, a fresh drawing spread out before him. She had left a warm plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him earlier, and he had eaten in small, slow bites. Now he was coloring again, focused and calm, but his free hand stayed curled slightly, ready to pull the page close if anyone got too near. Emma was about to refill the coffee pot when the sound hit, a low, building roar, mechanical, powerful. It began as a vibration, then a tremor that made the windows rattle slightly in their frames. Customers began turning in their seats. One man stood and peered out the window, squinting through the fog, and then the world shifted. A black helicopter descended into the parking lot across the street, its polished frame gleaming under the dull sky. Its presence was sudden, precise, and wholly foreign to this sleepy stretch of coastal town. Emma stepped forward, frozen. 3 black SUVs followed within seconds, pulling up like pieces on a chessboard. Uniformed men in tailored suits emerged, scanning the area with methodical efficiency. One spoke into a small microphone clipped to his lapel. The others moved with quiet urgency, securing the perimeter like they'd done this before, many times. Inside the diner, forks paused mid-air, coffee cups stilled on their saucers. No one spoke. Then the door of the central SUV opened slowly, and a man stepped out, tall, composed, wrapped in a charcoal gray overcoat that spoke of money and influence. His hair was streaked with silver at the temples, his eyes shielded by dark sunglasses. But even before he removed them, everyone knew who he was. Ethan Hale, tech giant, CEO of Hale Innovations. the kind of man who rarely appeared in public without being wrapped in layers of digital privacy and velvet rope exclusivity. And now he was here, on the cracked sidewalk outside the Driftwood Diner, his polished shoes stepping onto weathered concrete as if he belonged. The door to the diner opened with its usual chime. Ethan walked in. No one moved. He didn't scan the room for recognition. He didn't offer smiles or nods. He looked around once, slowly, then spoke in a voice both calm and commanding. "Is there a boy here named Noah?" Silence clamped down like a lid. Emma felt Noah tense behind her. She turned and saw his hand hovering above his drawing, frozen mid-stroke, his body pressed into the corner of the booth. She didn't think. She moved. In 2 strides, she was at the booth, sliding in between Noah and the room, placing herself directly in front of him. Ethan's eyes found her, steady and unreadable. Emma didn't speak. Neither did Noah. For a moment, the world seemed to contract to just the 3 of them. Emma's breath shallow, Noah trembling, Ethan holding something in his face that wasn't coldness, but something far older. Weariness. Hope. "You've been watching over him," Ethan said quietly. Emma didn't answer right away. She turned to Noah, whose eyes never left hers. Slowly, he gave the smallest nod. She looked back at Ethan and said, "Yes." He exhaled, as if releasing something he had been holding inside for a very long time. "I've been looking for him," he said, voice faltering just slightly. No one in the diner moved. Even Carl, behind the counter, had gone still. Ethan stepped closer. His gaze stayed on Noah, but he didn't crowd him. His voice dropped. "He disappeared 9 months ago. We were in Big Sur. Just a weekend getaway." His nanny stepped away for a moment. She was startled by a loose dog, fell, hit her head. By the time she came to, Noah was gone. Emma's breath caught. Noah didn't move. "We searched everything," Ethan continued. "Helicopters, dogs, heat sensors. I hired every tracker I could find. Weeks passed, then months, not a trace." He looked at Emma, "And I never gave up. Not once. But I didn't know where to look." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a sheet of paper, carefully folded. He held it up. Emma recognized it instantly. The drawing with the small house, the sun, the woman with long hair. The first one Noah had left on the table. "It arrived at a non-profit I support," Ethan said. "An art therapy program for children at risk. No note, just this drawing. They posted it online in case anyone recognized the style. My assistant caught it." He looked at Noah again, softer now. "It was him. I knew it." Emma glanced down at the drawing, and then at Noah, whose hands were clenched in his lap. Then, to everyone's surprise, Noah slid out of the booth, moved slowly toward Emma, and tucked himself into her side. His arms wrapped around her waist. Emma froze. Then a small sound broke the air. A breath, then a sob, and then words. Quiet, fragile, but real. "Mom." The diner gasped. Emma dropped to her knees, arms wrapping around the small boy she had found in the rain. The one who had sat in silence for weeks and now trembled in her arms, calling her the one name he had buried inside for too long. "I'm here," she whispered, pressing her face into his hair. "I'm right here, sweetheart." Ethan's hand went to his mouth, eyes wide and wet. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The room stood still, a sacred kind of silence wrapping around them all. Noah clung tighter, crying now, but not out of fear, out of release. The moment passed in slow breaths, in shaking hands, in eyes that finally met without walls. And for the first time in nearly a year, a boy found his voice, and a father found his son, and a woman who thought she'd only been serving breakfast, found herself part of something she never expected. A family just beginning. For 3 days, Ethan Hale stayed in Monterey Bay. He didn't leave in a flurry of press or bodyguards. He didn't charter a jet or whisk Noah away in some chauffeured whirlwind of security and spectacle. Instead, he checked into the small inn across the street from the Driftwood Diner, the one with salt on the windowsills and tea always brewing in the lobby. He walked past the diner's window each morning just after sunrise, hands in his coat pockets, and sat at the counter like any other local. He didn't talk much, just ordered black coffee and sometimes toast. But his eyes were always drawn to the booth by the window, where Noah sat, shoulders still slightly hunched, drawing. Emma noticed the way Ethan watched him, not with ownership, not with the tense worry of someone desperate to reclaim control, but with reverence, like he was seeing a miracle unfold in real time and didn't want to scare it away. Noah had started speaking more. Not in paragraphs, not in conversations, but words now. A name, a question, a simple thank you, whispered when Emma brought him extra napkins or hot cocoa with a swirl of cream. He still drew every morning, but the images were changing. More light, more color, more people. The stick figures had expressions now. The sun had a face again. Ethan never interrupted. One afternoon, he waited until the diner had cleared, until Noah had wandered out with Emma's sketch pad and a sandwich for the park bench down the street. Then he set down his cup and turned toward her. "May I walk with you?" he asked. She nodded. They strolled the boardwalk in silence, the sea lapping at the rocks beneath them, gulls wheeling above in the soft breeze. Monterey was quiet this time of day. Tourists gone. Only locals left. "You could have taken him," Emma said finally, her voice low. "I know," Ethan replied, "but you didn't." "No." She stopped walking and looked at him. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the ocean, his profile hard-lined and shadowed in the golden light. "Because I saw how he looks at you," he said finally. "Because I saw how he reaches for your hand first. Because I saw something I didn't expect. Someone who made him feel safe. Someone he chose." Emma blinked hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. "I'm not trying to take that from him," Ethan continued. "Or from you." He turned toward her fully now. "I know you didn't ask for this. And I know how unfair life can be when it asks you to carry something heavy without warning. But what you've done, for him, for me, you didn't just keep him alive. You gave him back something I thought was lost forever." Emma stared at her hands, unsure what to say. Ethan took a breath. "I've been thinking, I want to do something, not just for Noah, but for other kids like him. The ones who fall through the cracks. The ones who go silent because the world is too loud." Emma looked up. "I've got resources, networks, space, but I don't have the heart for this kind of work, not the way you do." She frowned. "I'm a waitress, Ethan." "You're a healer," he said softly. "You saw a boy the world ignored and loved him anyway. You built trust where there was only fear. You made a child speak again without asking for a single thing in return." He paused. "What if we built something together? A place, a center, somewhere kids like Noah can come, draw, eat, breathe, heal. A place that doesn't ask them to explain, just lets them exist until they're ready to become." Emma's breath caught. "You're serious?" "I am." "Why me?" "Because he chose you," Ethan said gently. "And because I've seen what happens when you walk into someone's storm. You don't run. You stay. The wind picked up slightly. Emma brushed her hair behind her ear. I don't know, she whispered. I wouldn't even know where to start. I'll help, Ethan said. You won't be alone. Emma looked out at the ocean. Far in the distance, a sailboat drifted lazily across the blue. I just wanted to make him feel safe, she said. You did, Ethan replied. More than I ever could. They walked in silence for a few more steps. Then Ethan added quietly, I don't want to ask you to let go of him. I want to ask if you'll stay with us. Be part of his life. However that looks. Emma turned toward him. You're not taking him. Ethan shook his head. No, I'm asking if we can build something around him. She didn't speak for a long time. Just stood there. The sea breeze brushing her cheek. The sounds of the town moving slowly behind them. Then she nodded. Yes, and with that one word, a door opened. One that hadn't existed until now. Not just for Noah, but for others who might come after. They spent the next week planning, quietly, carefully. Ethan secured an old community hall near the edge of town, once used for church picnics and bingo nights. Emma began meeting with local teachers, artists, therapists. She made lists, created meal plans, designed a mural wall in her notebook, and handed it to Noah one morning with a smile. This one's yours, she said. He smiled back. Not a big grin, but real, present. The center began to take shape, slowly at first, then with momentum. People started donating books, blankets, crayons, shelves. The town, curious at first, came to understand. This was no charity case. This was a seed, and it had been planted with one sandwich, one drawing, one word, Mom. By the time the paint dried and the doors were ready to open, Noah had spoken his first full sentence in public. He stood beside Emma in the empty hallway of the building and whispered, This place feels like home. And Emma, her eyes wet but steady, replied, That's because it is. Not a building of steel and glass, not a palace of technology and security, but a place made of care, of warmth, of chosen love, and that made it sacred. 1 year later, the hall that once stood forgotten at the edge of Monterey Bay had become something extraordinary. Where chipped paint and cobwebbed corners used to cling, now stood walls bathed in soft yellow and adorned with colorful murals. Smiling suns, winding oceans, trees filled with hearts. The building had been reborn as the Sunlight Center. It didn't look like much from the outside. A modest structure flanked by lavender bushes and a small handmade sign. But the moment you stepped inside, you felt it. A pulse, a presence, something alive. Emma stood near the front door, a clipboard in one hand and a crayon-streaked mug of tea in the other. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, a smear of orange paint on her sleeve. Children ran past her in a flurry of laughter and energy, some with hands full of chalk, others with scraps of paper flapping like flags. In one corner, 2 boys built towers with wooden blocks. In another, a girl traced stars onto the art wall, humming to herself. But it was Noah, now 10, who moved through it all, like the thread that tied the space together. No longer cloaked in silence, he smiled easily, pausing to help a younger child hold a glue stick steady or to show a new arrival where the markers were kept. His voice, once lost to the world, was soft but sure. He called Emma Mom now without hesitation, and Ethan, though still a man whose name carried global weight, had become simply Dad. He no longer arrived in pressed suits or with a guarded expression. These days, he wore sneakers, carried a backpack filled with snacks, and spent afternoons sitting on the floor with Noah and a group of kids, helping them build Lego cities or sketch rocket ships. The town had adjusted too. At first, whispers rippled about the billionaire who stayed, about the woman who somehow kept him grounded. But over time, that faded. Because what they built here wasn't a spectacle. It was a sanctuary, and the people could feel it. The community donated without fanfare. Artists painted for free. Retired teachers tutored reading in the afternoons. A local baker brought cinnamon buns every Thursday morning. What surprised Emma most wasn't how many people came. It was how deeply they stayed. She had thought, in the beginning, that Sunlight Center would be about saving kids. But it turned out healing worked both ways. Every day, she learned something about grace, about resilience, about the quiet bravery it took for a child to draw something that couldn't be said aloud. She found pieces of herself in every corner. The kids weren't the only ones changing. She had changed too. One warm afternoon in early spring, the center buzzed with an extra kind of joy. Streamers hung across the windows, and the scent of frosting and lemonade drifted through the air. It was Noah's birthday. He wore a paper crown, slightly crooked, and a shirt that read, "I speak my own way." Emma and Ethan had tried to keep the celebration small, but the children had taken over planning weeks ago. There were balloons tied to crayons, cupcakes with initials piped on top, and even a game where kids had to draw with their eyes closed and guess their own creation. When it was time for the cake, the lights dimmed. Candles flickered, and the children began to sing. Softly, sweetly, without any adult prompting. Noah stood in front of the cake, his eyes reflecting the candlelight, but he didn't blow them out. Instead, he turned to the group and reached for the small microphone set up for the storytelling circle. He cleared his throat, his hands trembling just slightly. Everyone stilled. He looked out at the crowd, at the kids who had become his friends, at Ethan with his hands folded proudly, and at Emma, standing just beside the wall of handprints, where his was the very first. "I didn't make a wish this year," he began. His voice was quiet, but carried. "Because I don't need to." He paused. "Last year, I didn't talk. I didn't think anyone would hear me if I tried. But then I met someone who didn't need words to know I was there. Someone who made me a sandwich and sat near me and never asked me to explain." Emma wiped at her eyes. Noah looked at Ethan. "I have a dad who never stopped looking for me." Then back to Emma. "And I have a mom who found me before I knew how to find myself." He smiled, shy and steady. "I don't need to make wishes anymore, because I already have everything I wished for." Applause broke like sunlight across the room. Children cheered. Some adults wept. Emma moved forward, gathered him into her arms, and felt Ethan's hand on her shoulder as he joined them. Later, as the sky turned golden and the last of the cupcakes disappeared, Ethan led Emma outside into the small garden behind the center. String lights glowed above, and laughter still floated from the windows. He took her hand, eyes soft but steady. "I always thought love looked like certainty," he said. "A grand plan, an empire. But I was wrong. It looks like this." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside, a simple gold ring. No diamond, no shine. Just one word etched inside. "Home." "I don't want a fairy tale," he said. "I want this. I want the drawings left on the kitchen table, the messy mornings, the quiet strength of knowing you're next to me, even when I doubt everything else." Emma didn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." The kids found them minutes later, led by Noah, who grinned wide and shouted, "They said yes!" That night, the sign outside Sunlight Center glowed in the moonlight. Beneath the name, in a hand-painted script, were 5 simple words: "The right family is chosen." And just beneath that, in crayon, someone had written, "We're not lost anymore." Inside, voices rose in a lullaby of laughter and joy. And outside, under the stars, a new family stood together. Not perfect, not planned, but true. And that made it everything. In a quiet seaside town, a woman named Emma Rowe stood behind a diner counter pouring coffee, unaware that a single silent boy would change her life forever. What began with a sandwich, offered in quiet compassion, turned into a bond stronger than blood. A connection that defied circumstance, history, and fear. Noah, a child wrapped in silence and mystery, found more than food at that corner booth. He found recognition, safety, a place where he didn't have to explain his absence, his trauma, or his pain. Emma, who had spent her life hiding from her own past, saw in Noah a reflection of her younger self. A child the world forgot. Someone who didn't need fixing, just someone who would stay. Through morning drawings, shared meals, and an unwavering sense of presence, the two created a rhythm the world couldn't break. And when the helicopters came, and Ethan Hale walked through the diner's door, the truth unfolded. Noah wasn't just any boy. He was the missing son of a billionaire. But the real story wasn't about wealth or headlines. It was about choice. Ethan, a man of power and privilege, didn't try to erase Emma's place in Noah's heart. Instead, he honored it. And together, they built something beautiful. A center for children who had no words, no homes, no peace. Sunlight Center wasn't born out of charity. It was born from lived empathy, from the quiet conviction that love is not something you inherit, but something you choose every single day. 1 year later, that diner booth became a memory. In its place stood murals, laughter, and light. Noah spoke not only with words, but with confidence. Emma didn't just serve meals, she served hope. And Ethan, once a man who thought he had everything, found the one thing he never knew he needed: a family. This story teaches us that healing doesn't begin with answers. It begins with presence, with showing up, with seeing someone not for who they should be, but for who they are right now. In a world that moves fast and forgets easily, Emma chose to pause, to notice, to care. And in doing so, she reminded us that no act of kindness is ever small when it's done with love. So ask yourself, who in your world sits quietly, hoping someone will see them? What would happen if you looked closer? If you reached out without needing a reason? Now we want to hear from you. What part of Emma and Noah's journey touched you the most? Do you believe chosen family can be even more powerful than one you're born into? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read them. And if this story stirred something in your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Impressive Storyteller. Your support gives us the motivation to keep telling these deeply human, unforgettable tales, because everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a place to call home. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to begin again.